Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grow IT podcast. And today I have Jackson Blaylock, who is the Executive Director of Sales for PRI Global. And if your business involves securing IT talent and pairing it with technology, which most of you probably are, then you're going to want to stick around for this conversation. I've had many conversations with Jackson offline, and he's one of my favorite guys to speak with. So, Jackson, thanks for coming on and letting us do this podcast together.
No, I'm super happy to be here. Like you said already, we've talked a lot, so I'm ready to get another conversation going.
I love it. All right, so let's jump in. So give us a little bit about your background. Tell us about what have been doing up until PRI and what you're doing there at PRI Global.
Yeah, so I've been in the talent augmentation or staffing space, if you want to call it, for about 11 years now. So I got into it, did banking for a couple years out of college. That wasn't for me. After 2 years, realized that, which I would argue was pretty quick, but some would argue a little slow. Got into staffing, which I didn't even know was a thing at the time, until somebody comes to you and says staffing and talent aug is a thing. So started in the light industrial side of the business. So all the warehouse work that you put the people to work for, hundreds of recs and all that kind of stuff that you work on. Cut my teeth there and then transition into the IT space and professional space. So from there, I did a full desk, did the sales, did the recruiting, did some personal development, people development, coaching, growing some offices from a regional perspective. So I'm in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I really hung around the Winston-Salem, Greensboro area from a growth perspective. And then it started to expand out. So started doing some regional direction, statewide, and then Southeast, and then national from an IT growth standpoint, growing out teams, coaching teams, growing out sales organizations. That's really been my specialty for the last 7 years and continue to evolve in that capacity. And now I'm at PRI and doing the same thing, right? So PRI, I've been here since October of 2023, so relatively new to PRI, but doing something very similar, right? Building up the sales team, expanding our geographical region, getting our name brand out there. So that's where I'm at now. And PR has been great. PRI, we do solutions and talent augmentation. So two of the main gigs in the industry, talent augmentation being pretty self-explanatory. We operate from a direct hire statement of work perspective. We also talk about talent as a service, which is our retained model for staffing services and integration. Then we do solutions delivery also. So AI integrations, app development, those kind of things. Big piece of our business.
Well, and obviously it's a big part of any business, right? I mean, in terms of the people and I always pair the two of the three legs of the stool, being people and processes, with the third kind of being the technology or the tools implemented. But, obviously one of those stools is a big one for you in terms of the people.
Right.
How do you view, what is the best way to kind of, improve business, whether it's the business processes, helping you getting your goals with regards to the people side, because it's critical, right? And you obviously are swimming in those waters every day.
Yeah, I think, it starts with people, right? Everything's relational. I think that one of the main things that everybody needs to hone in on and focus on is how we're not only developing from an internal relationship perspective, a people perspective, but also externally, and maybe more importantly, externally in the long run, because those relationships become the ones that stay. The ones that stay becomes the organic growth business that you're going to have in year 3 and year 5. So it starts with identifying the people that you want to work with. And that's one of the main things. I think one of the red flags that you run into in business, again, internally and externally, is this somebody that I want to operate with on a day-to-day basis? A lot of times it's reflective of the nature of the business that you're going to be doing. So if you have somebody that you connect with, the communication is on point, the cadence is on point, there's transparency, trust, communication, credibility, that's reflective of how that relationship is going to operate in its entirety. So that's that primary identifier from a relationship standpoint.
What obviously from the people standpoint, right? That especially in tech, good talent is in such demand and so hard to find. I imagine that's probably one of the bigger challenges that you're helping solve for your clients, right? Because it's typically kind of what you ask is you're trying to understand what challenges and outcomes your clients are looking for to help them, overcome or get to whatever their desired outcome is. How do you approach that with clients?
Yeah, talent is at a premium because we're running across a talent pool that is pretty tight. In order for us to identify the right person for the right job, there's a few things that come into play. You're playing in a pool of very, very experienced, very talented, smart IT people that are either not on the job market because they currently have a job that they like, and that's a lot of times what we're running into. And we're trying to put them in a different job, and that's a primary challenge here. And on the flip side, you have somebody that is actively pursuing a job, but also, as everybody should, know their worth, what they bring to the table, how they're operating and how they've been operating in the capacity for years past. So the challenge for us, I think any firm in this capacity, is finding the culture fit, as well as the fit from a professional standpoint, an operational standpoint. So when we have conversations with clients, it's one of the primary conversations we're having is, hey, we know what the hard skills look like. That's something across the board. And that's the easy, that's the black and white, the A and B, right? But the soft skill standpoint and the growth expectation there within is where we identify and where we can come up with, okay, our candidate pool, while it was finite to begin with, is slimmed even more, which is both, you get both sides of the coin. On one side, it's a smaller talent pool, makes it tougher. On the flip side of that, it's a smaller talent pool. So the people that we do identify, we know are going to be qualified in all capacities, how we want to place them, how we want to operate within the client. So it builds that immediate credibility and that long-term growth. I'm less interested in finding short-term solutions. And I think, and what I've seen specifically the last 2 years is that the people that we're placing or the solutions delivery challenges that we're running across, they're much more interested in the long-term effect, the long-term profitability and productivity that's going to be in place based on whatever context we're working. So that piece of it is where we find the most success. I always talk about, and you've heard this a million times, is the wet spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. That's easy to do, right? If you look at just hard skills, you can identify the hard skills across the board in every which way and twice on Sundays, but you're not going to find somebody that's going to be the specific long-term fit and growth. So when we talk about, let's look at it as from a year's perspective. Let's look at what a year expectation is. And how does that year translate into year 2 and year 3 and year 5? Those things are really important. And you build up a rapport, not only with the person and the talent augmentation opportunity, not only a decision maker and a staffing solutions opportunity or delivery model, but with the company overall. I'm more interested in the impact. So when we focus on impact from a people perspective and a talent pool perspective, much more successful. I'm a big conversion rate guy.
As I am as well, being in the sales and marketing side, right? Most of us are.
Right.
Like when you talk about that culture part, which is critical, right? I mean, it's
Right.
you're kind of matching the talent with the culture of a company. What are some things that you ask or try and understand to try and get a feel for what that company's culture is like, and whether or not that person that you're trying to match with them from a talent perspective is going to be able to integrate and be a good long-term hire?
So I utilize something internally that I also translate to an external conversation with the client. So I hire somebody onto my sales team. Day one, they've already been through a rigorous process. They've already talked about their accolades and their backgrounds and how they've operated and why they'd be a good fit and how that fit would translate to the company. Wonderful. Day one, they're hired. The first conversation that I have with them is, what's next? What's your next job here? Right. And it's really important, and it throws a lot of people off because what do you mean what's next? I haven't got started with what's now. And that's great. But if we can parse out where you're going to go, first of all, you as the employee immediately understand that I'm invested in your development. I'm more invested in your development in this process. So when I start talking about our one-on-ones and our development workshops and our cadence and our continued education and how we got to operate in the capacity, it's because we're going to get you to what your answer is going to be from that question. The same conversation with a client operates in the same capacity. When we're talking about, if it's a talent augmentation standpoint, one of the first questions I ask is, okay, well, I have a list of 28 positions that you gave that you're going to allocate over the next 18 months. Let's go down the line here. Have a conversation with it. What's this person doing in the next role in this company? And same thing, right? In order to get there, they're going to tell you all of the soft skills that they need. They're going to tell you what they need to reach, how they need to accomplish it. So you're going to get the answers the same way as if I asked, what makes a successful person in this job, which is what everybody's asking. I want to know what makes a successful career in this company. And that's that 30,000 foot view question. because then they start to tell you about the culture. They start to tell you about the people that have tenure at the company, what that culture looks like, what the conversations are, what people say about it, the reviews from an internal perspective, what clients say in their relationship. There's a cascading informational overflow that you get just by asking simplistic questions. That initial question opens the floodgates, and then you can kind of pick and prod and aim at what you want to aim at and get some more specific answers along the way. And you come across with what was a blank canvas, and now you have this full picture of what this looks like over this person's potential career. That's how we paint a different picture, right?
You mentioned, the simplistic questions, and, as we know from the sales standpoint, I mean, just being able to ask the right questions or the best questions will elicit the best information that helps you, solve those issues, but they're not always as complex as people think, right? I mean, sometimes they are just simple questions. And really, that's what always amazes me. It's not this extravagant, talking about OpEx versus CapEx or, long-term goals, or sometimes it's just the simple questions like, hey, like, why didn't the person previously work out in that role, right?
Sure.
Or whatever it may be, right? But why don't you tell me about some, like, people love success stories, right?
Sure.
And I know you've got them. So tell me about some success stories that you've had with clients, whatever, and success comes in a number of different forms, right? Sometimes it's challenges that you help clients overcome. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's, the KPI stuff that we love in sales, right? Taking them from here to there, or hockey stick type of stuff. But, it varies. And so I love hearing success stories in terms of how you are able to help clients in that manner.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is one that I use as an example with this kind of question a lot. Is we do a lot in healthcare, right? So the health tech space, the fintech space, retail, these are primary avenues of operation for us from a company standpoint, and me individually over my career. So healthcare has always kind of held a soft spot for me because a lot of those initial relationships have started in that capacity. I had a target client at the time, which was working under an MSP, right? So we all feel certain ways about MSPs, depending on how you work with them, right? My main thing is the communication aspect. And if you're in sales, and how much we like to talk and communicate, and that's our main gig. Well, MSPs can be a little bit tough in that capacity. There's a bunch of advantages to MSPs, but along the same line, we don't have the opportunity to get the right feedback to build a good rapport, build a good relationship. In this particular capacity, it's a very large healthcare facility with a lot of players under the MSP. And we did the normal thing, two submittals by 8 a.m. every Tuesday and Thursday. We'll tell you if that person got picked and they can move forward the process, and so on and so forth. Well, there's a few things that I identified as not working for us because we just kept getting rejected, right? Our candidates kept getting rejected throughout this process. It went on for about 2 months' time, and we hadn't gotten anybody to a third round interview yet. But their feedback there on the conjoined call, right, with everybody on it, wasn't giving us the necessary information. So we talked about this previously in one of our numerous conversations, and this is the first time that I utilized it in the capacity. We're talking about the book Jab, 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 Right Hook. So shout out to Gary Vee. And I took that approach. So I found a couple of the decision makers, and we started sending what I deemed valuable information based on what the market was dictating, external things that could affect the potential year to 2 years, what I've identified happening the last year within the healthcare space, and so on and so forth. Never making an ask, just giving information. Did an initial connection on LinkedIn like everybody does. But with that connection, I just started posting things that I knew would reach them. And then I started sending them direct messages that I deemed at least officially could be valuable to them in the long run. So finally, I think it was after the 7th one. And when I say I think, I know it was because it sticks in my brain. The 7th piece of information, I got an outreach from the hiring manager. And he said, hey, just starting to now look at this, which was funny to me and very true, and it's held true, is listen, you've got to continue to do your outreach. And at some point, they're going to open one of them. So that told me that they didn't open any of them prior to that 7th one. But something in the 7th one spoke to them, right? Whether it was like, hey, this name keeps popping up in my inbox or whatever it may be. I found this really valuable. Can we hop on a call? Yes, let's hop on a call. So hopping on that call, Then we had a full-blown hour-and-a-half conversation about market. We had a full-blown, and I didn't bring up anything about the fact that we worked within the MSP. They had known where I worked because they could see it on LinkedIn. So finally, they called and said, "Hey, I know you work with this company. Do you guys know that we have an MSP?" Well, at that point, yes, I'm answering a question. We actually do work with the MSP. Oh, how's it going? Kind of talk through the whole process. At the end of it, what we came up with was, listen, we should build a relationship cadence here, because what was unbeknownst to anybody was the MSP was about to run out and they were not going to renew. So we said, all right, we're going to wait till this runs out. You and I are going to build up a cadence like we are going to right now. So we put something weekly on the books to have a conversation because we were both getting something out of it. And then we said, all right, I want to understand what worked, what didn't work. What were you seeing? What didn't work? What didn't work? What were you seeing in the resumes? What were you seeing that you were identifying and moving through the process? And what we came up with was there was more gap space in the expectation of what they needed and what was the reality of what they were receiving, right? So everything that we put through the process, we got on the phone call, we utilized our weekly to talk through any individuals we identified and had conversations with that could be potential fits for the company. And then they walked me through what that culture fit looked like and then what the hard skills looked like. And we had the exact conversation we just talked about, which was, what is the long-term growth? They meet all these expectations and this project finishes. What's the next thing? Is it on the docket already, or do they have an opportunity to grow within the company? We had all these conversations, and all of a sudden we became the primary talent augmentation vendor 3 months time after they had gotten rid of that. 3 months time, we got in the talent augmentation primary opportunity. So now we were getting all of the roles 2 to 3 weeks ahead of anybody else. And we were filling 70 to 80% of those roles. Their profitability and their productivity went up because we got the monthlies, we got the MBRs on there. So their productivity based, and this was in the cybersecurity realm went from 37% to 55%, which is
Wow.
a nice leap in a year. And we retained that relationship, and that relationship has followed me throughout my career. So it had more to do with having a conversation, building a relationship, providing value, providing credibility than anything it had to do with what a resume said.
Okay, there's a lot there. You touched on a lot of great stuff. So we're gonna try and, what's the term? You're gonna try and unpack some of it. There you go. We're gonna try and unpack some of this. Okay, so you and I are both big on value forward, right?
Yes.
And I don't want to put you on point to ask you if you remember what that seventh, that seventh piece of content or seventh touch point was, but the ability to put valuable content out on the marketplace and also to send to prospects is huge, right? If I get one email, I get 100 with bumping this up to your top inbox. Things that I think it's so important to stop and think about before we make contact with a prospect is this going to be of value to them? Not value to us, not like, hey, I'm bumping this top of your inbox because I want to know if I can further this deal. It's like, how are we, when I'm going to make contact with them, is it going to provide some value to them?
Right.
I want you to talk a little bit about that part first, the value forward, delivering as much value as possible before you even get to a point to where you're going to do a transaction for a single dollar with a client. So talk to me about your, purview and your outlook on the value proposition side of things.
Well, two things. First, I remember the title of the email, the inbox that I sent, which will make you laugh, but I also remember the context that was in. So I had sent 6 previous messages. So they'd been in her inbox at some point and had my name and everything in there. So the title of the 7th one was my name, Jackson Blaylock, and my phone number. That was it. It's just Jackson Blaylock phone number. And then when it's a weird title because people would normally put a salesy title in there. And what it did was, and she told me this after the fact, was it made her go back and look and see what else was in her inbox from me. And there were 6 other messages. And the context of the actually inbox was the increase in cybersecurity awareness in healthcare specifically. So there was a very specific item that I remember researching, which was some healthcare companies, if you were a patient there and you would request the information on your mobile app. So I need my health chart. I had a blood test done, whatever it may be. The information that was sent out was fully protected. And that was great. It was fully encrypted, fully protected. But the information bouncing back was getting hacked. And there was an increase in that. And I just honed in on this in a couple of lines. And that's what actually got the call back. Anyway, I digress. Value forward. Yeah. So value forward for me is trial and error, first of all. because I think anybody that's been in sales, anybody that's been in this industry has done the 1 million phone calls a day that you found, online or however you remember. I mean, I vividly remember driving down when I got in the industry, driving down streets and seeing company names and jotting them down real fast or taking a picture of my phone. And that would be my call list. You know what I mean? So it was a call list, and I won't take credit for this because it was actually somebody that was in a workshop of mine from a couple of years ago. We were doing live time, and we talked about value add and value credibility and understanding, how we're going to go about this. But in order to make it really hit home, we first do a call block without any coaching, without any workshopping, just to identify how people operate in this capacity. So you had some people that brought a bunch of lists, some people that brought companies they had gone after for a while, so they had some information. And this guy, he ended up being one of the top sales guys in the company, picked up the phone, rang, left a voicemail, hung up, looked at me directly right after he left the voicemail and said, I realized midway through that ring that I had no plan if that person picked up the phone. Like, this is a great starting point, right? There's no value add that was prepared, no direct correlation to company, no market expertise. So it was a great starting point. The same thing happened to me in context where it was, I got tired of making so many calls and getting either gatekeepers that would turn me down, getting decision makers with no time, getting no's, getting nothing. So there were two things that changed my mindset on this. One was the value add credibility, because I saw people that were in the same company as me, same job as me, having wild success. Their success was all conversion rated at that point, which to that date I had not yet started to do. So I was seeing that they were getting 7 out of 10 answers. And of those 7 answers, 4 of them were having conversations. And 4 conversations turned into 2 pitches to one client. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. I'm making 400 calls and I'm getting 400 no's, right? So I need to understand what's happening from a context standpoint. So 2 things. One was the mentality to understand that a no doesn't necessarily mean in this business no in its entirety. If you take the context of that means that I have not done my job to tell you the value that's going to be added in this conversation. I haven't had that opportunity yet. That's all me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not you. So that comfort level. But then digging deeper, figuring out that this person, she was an absolute baller. She was making 10 calls to companies that she understood the ins and outs of that company. Understood who she was reaching out to, where they've been, what they've done, how they operate, yada, yada. So the conversations she was having with people that she knew, even if she hadn't talked to them yet, she knew them on a contextual basis of how that would operate. So those 10 conversations were way different than my 10 conversations. And when I say 10 conversations, my 10 no's. So moving forward in that capacity was kind of a deep dive. So that's when I started to read the books and understand what the value add credential meant. So value add credential being, I should not feel comfortable making a phone call if I don't have something that person is going to deem as interesting.
100%.
Credible.
100%.
And until I get there, they don't go on my call list. They're not on my qualified call list. Qualifying a business doesn't mean that they have the revenue to make it make sense from a business standpoint. Qualifying the business also means that I have something to lend. So the initial outreach for us, there's a few things that I look for from a value add is we need to be able to talk to 2 internal pieces of expert information, of market expertise. So that can be internal company information, how that company operates, what they do, who their subsidiaries are, parent companies, sister company, whatever it may be, what they provide, product, service, all that information, which is pretty standard information. But then the external information is the value add. So there's 3 pieces of external information that I want to gather before I do any kind of outreach. It could be industry specific, vertical specific. It could be government regulations. It could be price points, market analysis, something that is going to be of value to them. That's something beyond what they probably can look up in the first 5 minutes of their day on a market cap data perspective. Hey, this is from an industry specific opportunity. This is what I'm seeing. That's the conversation I'm having. I'm not saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Let me tell you what I can do for you. That's not what I'm saying. It's just like, this is it. I would love your feedback. And part of what I've seen is getting the answer. Like, hey, this is what I'm saying, but you're in the weeds. I want to understand. Teach me something.
And I can tell you just from what you just mentioned there, even just staying as specific as industry, right? Just if you're going to take 5 minutes, you can go. I mean, there's so much information that's available to us now. Back to your point of driving around. Back when I started in business, they handed you a phone book and so there's got to be some winners in there. Start dialing, right? It's so simple. There's so much information out there, right? And these people, I have these conversations internally to our folks. these people are busy. They're running their businesses, right?
Yeah.
So, they, even though it may be in their industry, they may not have the time to find these things. So if you can do something as simple as that, right? Going out there, finding something that's pertinent in the news today to their industry, that can be of value to them, right? It's going to get you into a conversation because you've just eliminated 99 out of 100 people that are probably trying to do the same thing, but you've just elevated yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not difficult. It really isn't. But
No.
it's so important. And I have a lot of conversations. You do too with salespeople, right? And they're like, it's hard to cut through the noise, right? That's like the one kind of
Absolutely.
the point of contention that always comes back. And I'm like, well, you need to do a better job of creating that value proposition to have that conversation to cut through the noise, because there is a lot of noise, but it's so easy, right? I mean, you don't have to do too much effort. You see the same emails and cold calls that come in, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other piece that I've noticed is value does not only pertain to business specific. So showing what I mean is connection, right? So you and I have a conversation. I know you're a very busy person. I'm going to value your time as well. So there's little things there that, that reverence to time is really important because you don't know me from Adam. So you haven't experienced anything of value that I add besides what I've sent you thus far, which may be of a little bit of interest, but I'm going to send you a 10-minute meeting invite. That's going to be a lot different than the hour and a half long meeting invite that you get. I'm also going to attach information that I've done on a research standpoint. So just so you know, hey, read this at your convenience, at your leisure, read it ahead of time. Something I can refer to in my 10 minutes is going to lend itself to the exact thing that we just talked about, which is that value addition. 10 minutes is going to turn into 20, going to turn into 30, but it's all about how much value you're compiling, right? We talked about this in a previous conversation. I think it's so poignant to discuss in any conversation. In this industry or in any sales, everybody focuses on the gap. What's missing? What's not working, right? And yes, we should address that in its entirety, 100%. You should be audible ready, pivot as necessary, understand what changes need to be made, address those changes, be willing to change from your own standpoint in order to meet the needs and the requirements of this opportunity. I feel like everybody misses, not everybody, but I feel we miss a lot of times of, hey, we also need to compound the interest of what's working.
Totally agree.
Let's hit both of those things. Why would I not? Hey, that's an investment. Why would I not compound that interest? Let's go.
So let's stay on that for a second. I do think that, and I don't know. And again, as humans, we're all hardwired, pretty similar. And I don't know if that's, the squirrel effect, the, shiny object syndrome, whatever it may be,
Sure.
but that happens a lot, right? You see that not only with individuals, but with organizations, right? Who it's like, hey, you have something that's working there. Why move away from it, right? Like, I mean, why not just keep stepping on the gas in terms of on that, adding fuel to that fire, scaling that process up? Why do you think that is? I don't have an answer to that yet.
I think there's two things that happen simultaneously. One is grass is greener is always prevalent. So they're looking is to see like, okay, grass greener being, again, production, opportunity, idea, grass is greener. So let's try that new, you said it, right? That butterfly or squirrel thing, the butterfly, but the squirrel thing, which guilty, right? Everybody's guilty.
Same. Yeah.
So I'm going to chase that. But the other thing is if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. I agree, disagree. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, but let's continue to build upon those things.
Improve it.
Let's improve it because you can make shifts. It's like a great example that I heard in a conference was just car models. Very simple example. Car models, right? So because the Model T worked and it was the first thing to run down the streets, the cobble streets and take you from A to B in a different capacity, doesn't mean that you stick with the Model T. Now we're going to continue to make evolutionary progress and we're going to make it better and better and safer and faster and faster. And then all of a sudden you get in 2024 and you see what's on the road. That only happens when you're compounding the interest of what works. So if something works, let's make it better. You didn't go from a Model T to a flying car because the Model T works great. Right. So in the same context, you have both those things are true at the same time. You have everybody wanting to try everything new, which is the gap. And then you have the acquiescence of saying that works. So we're just going to leave it be and let it run. Where if we can say, all right, we're going to continue to improve the thing that works. And the conversation or the talking points that I see that work in that context are not, hey, I'm going to ignore the gap and I'm going to focus on what works, or I'm not going to ignore what works and focus on the gaps. It's you have to have some kind of credible market expertise to explain the why behind the approach to both of those things. So what I mean is, all right, if that works and I'm making a 7% year over year improvement in this particular capacity in my company, so I'm good with that 7%. Wonderful. If I tell you, well, the market is actually saying that we should be seeing an 11.5% year to year increase, you're missing out on a good chunk of percentage there. So, and I can show you that this is what the market dictating. I can show you why it's dictating that. It's not because that doesn't work. It's because people are making continuous improvements to the exact thing that you're happy with at 7%. On the flip side of that, the net growth from zero, the gap, is going to be predicted at 3.5%, 3.7%. And this is the why. If I can show you the why, you're going to be much more willing to listen and have a conversation about it, because you just heard that you're missing out on 4.5% and 3.5%. So let's combine those things and make it a hell of a year. That's going to be a different conversation.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So one of the things I want to talk to you about, obviously we're both kind of in that, sales and biz dev and marketing strategy and lead gen, whatever you want to throw all in that bucket. What are the big challenges? What are the biggest challenges kind of managing growth coming into where you're coming in? I mean, you're a grow guy, right? Like, right. So are we, right? So what are the challenges that you face in that when you come into, like even with PRI, right? Like what are the challenges that you guys face as you try and exponentially grow your business?
So there's a few things. I think the first of all is depending on the size of your company, right? Size of the company, brand awareness, logo awareness, getting in the weeds of understanding like how we're going to expand out from a geographical opportunity and look at it from that capacity. Those are the initial challenges, the identifiers. Again, not to be a dead horse there, but okay, so we have some stuff that works. Our solutions business is on point. Our delivery model is amazing. Like we've seen year to year increase in solutions opportunity and delivery. So that is, again, that's one of those things that we're to look at and we're to say, okay, we're going to double down on that, but we're going to expand it out from a sales perspective. Everything's working in the geographical areas where we've been, which is mostly kind of in that St. Louis area, right? Where our headquarters is. Well, I'm on the East Coast. I'm going to take that up and down the East Coast. And I'm going to find a team that's going to take it up and down the West Coast. And we're going to expand geographically into the model of what's working. So that's the expansion there. So the first challenge is getting the word out. How are we marketing it? How are we delivering on it? The case studies are case studies. And case study for me, and we've talked about this again too, is you don't want to hear what the problem was, me take you through the entire process, 2.5 hours later, get to the solution and tell you what it was. You want to see what the problem was, because chances are, if I'm in fintech and you're a fintech company, one fintech company has a very similar problem to another fintech company.
100%.
So I'm going to tell you the problem and I'm going to tell you the solution. And I'm going to make how we get there very specific to you and your company. I'm going to build it out cohesively. That's really important. So those identifiers and the build outs is an initial challenge. On the flip side, from a talent augmentation standpoint, one of the biggest challenges, and it's their solutions too, but I can skip a rock and hit 17 different talent augmentation companies, right? Staffing companies. Mm-hmm. Differentiators are huge. So how are you differentiating yourself from that? It's one of the best questions, or not, I say best questions, most commonly asked questions from anybody. Well, it goes back to what we initially talked about. The credibility build and the value addition is part of what we're going to lay out from a 1 to 3 to 5 year opportunity standpoint, and get you to understand that this is a partnership. It's a two-way partnership, right? This is not a one-way partnership. There's going to be value out of on both sides. So identifying the right type of company, and I say type from a couple of different standpoints, the people that we want to communicate with and who we want to operate with. How do they operate? Are they solid internally? Do we want to continue down that path? Business credibility standpoint, what's the growth look like? Is there growth? Is the growth need there and they haven't been able to experience it? Because that's an identifier for us as well, and how we grow in that capacity. But also, I'm looking at transitional companies, transitional identifiers. So companies that are going from startup to small to mid, large enterprise, because those are the companies that I've seen have the biggest need from external expertise. And you can take that in whichever context you want: consultancy, staff augmentation, talent as a service, retained models, solutions delivery. The need for growth is so exponential in transitional companies. And if you know what you're looking for, that's a big part of the battle. If we know what we're looking for in a transitional company, Oh man, there's a board change happening. That's transition. That company jumped from $20 million to $50 million last year. I bet they have a bunch of need to maintain and that growth and continue to experience that growth. That company is going through a public acquisition. That's a change. There are these markers to look for and identify. So the biggest challenge from net anything, if you look at it from net zero perspective and from a rolling P&L perspective, a rolling year to year, you kind of should always look at it from a net zero. Doesn't matter where you end up. Your net zero is your growth starting point.
Right.
So first base buildup is the identifiers, identifying the need, identifying the expansion, identifying the companies, qualifying said companies in context. And then you can start to build exponentially from there. But you have to have a base, right? You can't build a house on sand. So you got to build it on solid ground. So in order for us to do that, the identifying is the hardest part. You're not going to bat 1,000 there.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you're going to bat 1,000. If I had the secret to that, I'd probably hold it close to the vest. And get but if I did it, but if I knew the secrets, right, then you make a lot of money giving those secrets away. Yeah. But you're not going to bat 1,000. So we talked about conversions. Yeah, and I actually alluded to the number earlier on. I'm sitting at the 70-70 mark, the 70% and 70%. So if I 10 of my companies, 70% of those companies, 7 out of 10 end up being fully qualified opportunities, that's great. If I can, and of those, the ones that transition into meetings, if I can close 70% of my meetings to opportunities, and then those opportunities transition into 70% billables, and then we retain that 70% of those relationships year to year, we're winning. We're finding this exponential growth. The layout, the genesis is the hardest part. Anywhere you go, where do you start?
Right.
How do you identify?
Right.
That's the piece. That's the skeletal structure. Right. Then, so how do we put the meat and bones around it? Right. How do meat around the bones? How do we put the meat and potatoes in there? That's the build out thereafter. And it's always going to contain evolution. It's always going to change. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I've identified as not a secret to success, but a willingness to succeed is your willingness to pivot. That's one of the main things. It's so easy to get stuck in the mud. Right.
It is. And I guess one of the questions I want to ask you is, when you're coming in, are you looking in terms of if you were to put together a priority list, right? Mm-hmm. You come in and say, okay, we're here to grow, right? Mm-hmm. Do you look at, hey, where have you been successful? What's working, right? Kind of what we were alluding to and talking to earlier, like, hey, what's working? And then going, okay, great. Let's utilize some of the case studies that we have, success stories, right? To go out to the market, go to market strategy. I mean, what is your kind of in your head internal, rough priority list that you have when you come in?
For a client specifically?
Yeah. Or both. Yeah, it can be both because obviously you've come into PR relatively recently within the last several months, right? So both from their standpoint and a client standpoint. Because growth is the same, right? It's the same because our clients this is why it's so important. You mentioned the transition part, right? And transition is great for opportunity, but managing growth is one of the most difficult things to do. And our clients see the same thing, right? So this could really be, and the same things that I would imagine you're a practice what you preach type of guy. So the same things that way you would approach it, you would recommend that a client does as well. So maybe just kind of talk to me through kind of what you would view in your priority list and how that could apply to a client too.
Yeah. So first of all is identifying the priorities. So that's the first piece, right? And the way that I go about doing that is that 30,000 foot view that I talked about. And people love to use the word audit. I hate that word, right? Because
it reminds me of accounting.
Yeah, there's a negative connotation with it, whether you mean it or not. So when I say a 30,000 foot overview, I want to hear from the tenured people that have been here. I want to hear from a company standpoint, a history standpoint. Give me the highlights. Right? So inevitably, what happens is you give me the highlights. You give me that da-na-na, da-na-na. You give me the real. It's all the good stuff. But what I get from that is not only what the good is, but I can also identify the gaps based on what you're leaving out. So then my priority becomes, okay, let's talk about both of those things. Why that's worked, how it's worked, what changes have been made, how have you improved upon those changes, and then let's go back and talk about where we're filling in. So I heard you not mention X, Y, and Z. Let's talk about that. Why? What happened? Do we have something there that we can aim at, that we can go and talk to, we can plan for, we can become audible ready in that process? So my A priority is always discovery. And people love to say discovery meetings. Discovery meetings, most of the time for anybody in this industry, mean what jobs available that I'm going to work on, what projects available that I'm going to get paid.
That's like surface level, right? That's surface
It's
level discovery.
it's a mile wide and inch deep, right? And that's not where we want to go. So discovery for me is the nitty gritty. And I look at it from a triangular perspective. We talked about this on our first call. You know, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times people start from a point of a job or a solutions project, and then they kind of widen out at the bottom, and then you end up a mile wide and an inch deep because you have all of this context that isn't necessarily applicable to what you were trying to accomplish. So I like to look at it from the opposite standpoint. You know, we start really wide. Give me the good, bad, and the ugly. And let's end up at multiple fine points that we can address throughout the process of this relationship. So that first priority is identifying the good, bad, and the ugly. That's my first priority. The second priority there is understanding the cadence that's been happening. So what I mean is if it's a solutions need from a client perspective, it's an internal cadence from a one-on-one KPI conversation, whatever that looks like. How has it operated in the past? Because there's inevitably going to be shifts. The expectation of shifting is both client and internal because this is new. It's a new relationship. So you should never go in thinking that you're going to operate in the same capacity of the person before you did, whether you are the vendor or whether you are the manager or however it may be. There's inevitably going to be changes. So if you can describe the what, so I look at priorities like this: the what's worked, what hasn't, what's been going on, what are the goals, what's the history. That's always the what. But the priorities that are bigger, right? So that's priority A, just understanding it. But I need to get to the how and the why. Because if I can understand those things, then I can really start to build a relationship and a conversation. And then the what, as a result, becomes not an end game, but the next point, the next stopping point. It's like a train station. The next station.
I want to
That's
ask you this. I want to ask you something on the how and the why.
Yeah.
Those are the two important ones, right? The what is those are usually the easiest ones in a conversation to get across. But what they say, I don't want to use the prepositions too much, but right, we're going to get confused on whether we're talking about the topic or whether
Right.
The how and the why typically are tougher to get at, right? They're tougher to get on the table to have discussions. And some of it can just be built on in terms of the trust. Hey, do I trust Jackson, right? Does he have my best interest? And again, that's not going to be something that happens right out the gate, right? But what are some of the key factors to try and get at the how and the why? Both from a relationship standpoint, value standpoint, time standpoint. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
100%. So initially went to school for music in college, right? So crescendo was a big part of the
You were going to
reason.
be a rock star? Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, I might be in my spare. You don't know what happens after a podcast. Parents might just be in, different, rock makeup. You wouldn't even know. You wouldn't even know
This
that.
is true.
Yeah. But I like the idea of a crescendo. So growing into, getting bigger, right? Getting larger. So when we talk about the what and the how and the why, so the what helps me transition the conversation to the why, because I don't want to get to the how yet. I don't know the how yet. I know how I've done things in the past. I know how our company has operated in that capacity. I know how other companies have utilized these strategies and these implementations and so on and so forth. I know how it's come to be on the other end of it, right? But I need to understand the why first. So why is this need there? Why is the project there? Why are you concerned about it in a good way, both good and bad? Is there a concern? Why? Tell me the why from your perspective, because the why for me is going to tell me also the motivation behind it, whether that be personal or company specific.
Yes.
I want both.
Yes.
What is the why? Tell me the why. So if you're telling me that the why is very close to home because you came on and part of your coming onto the company was that you're going to build out this division and this division is going to have this response and these results and you are mid-level and you're stuck. That's a very honest conversation. And the honest conversations are the best ones, right?
100%.
It sounds so easy to just say, but the vulnerability conversations, and that's one of the main challenges, getting to a point where you and I can just sit down and, hey man, well, I'm here for a reason. Let's have the conversation of the why. So why I'm here. So I'm stuck. Great. That tells me all I need to know. I'm stuck. These are the expectations. This is what we've tried thus far. This is my why. Then the why from the company is an easy transition. Well, why is the goal here? Why is the project here? Why is the talent augmentation here? The why behind that. Then we get into the how. And once I would argue to anybody, the why is the most difficult piece of that conversation.
Totally agree. 100% agree with you.
It's because it is the vulnerable conversation. Why is it here? Why is it not happening in the way that you envisioned it from the very beginning, or the company envisioned it from the very beginning? Why am I here? Let's have the conversation by it. Whether it's like, hey, you messaged me 74 times on LinkedIn with really valuable information, and you finally just said, all right, I give
I
up.
give up. Yeah.
Right. But the why is really important. Once the why is there, the why is the blueprint. And now I can say, okay, let's build this out, and let's build it out to these specific needs. And this is the how. The how is not singular. Just make that very clear. There is no one size fits all.
Correct.
There is no one answer to multitude of problems. The how is going to look like, hey, this is plan A for this particular problem. If we see this shift in the marketplace, if we this shift in the results that we're finding, or we're not meeting our own expectations from a delivery standpoint, we're going to shift to plan B. And this is plan B, and this is the why plan B. And I'm going to tell you the why and the how that I'm going to come up with in congruence with your why and how. And we're going to build a relationship because I'm invested in it. You're invested in it. Let's do this thing. But that expectation is huge. So once you get past the why, the how becomes a much more fluid conversation. And then you have this, again, I keep saying cadence, but you have this weekly, daily, whatever it may
100%.
be. We're just catching up. This is what's working, what's not. Give me your feedback. Tell me what you see. I want to see it from both sets of eyes in both companies.
This is where the relationship side of business, in my opinion, comes into play, is uncovering the true whys, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually just came back, as you know, from a client workshop, and we've been heavily involved with them for the last month, launching them. And I learned more every time we have deeper and deeper conversations. I learn more about the whys. I've come back from that trip and I know exactly the whys now. And it's nothing I would talk about anything other than with the two business owners of that. But I
100%.
understand the whys a lot better now. Now, some of that could be just the trust that, we've delivered a lot of value both before we were engaged and as well as the last month here. But that is probably the relationship side, and developing that relationship and building that trust with a prospect / client is, to me, it's the key factor of getting to those whys that's going to allow you to develop the how and the what side, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a realization I've kind of come to recently, realizing how important that relationship, that trust is, to truly understanding the whys so you can build out the hows and the whats.
Yeah. I like the thought process, the house, the what's you're looking up.
I was trying to think in my head. I'm like, okay, where's the how? Okay.
Which am I looking for?
Right.
But in that same line, I think it's so important to talk about the fact that there's not a hard stop on any of those three. That part of the conversation is always a nuance. It's a nuanced piece of the conversation that a lot of times doesn't happen because you're there for a specific why, specific how, a specific what. You deliver. There's no hard stop there. Having the conversation like, listen, this is going to continue to evolve. So this what and this why and this how, we're going to get to the end of this. And then that what is going to change. And there's going to be a new evolution of a what. And then we're going to talk about the why and the how after that. And that's going to continue to progress. That's company growth, right? And the goal here, and I love having this part of a conversation when you get to a strong relationship-driven partnership, is you start to see that your business relationship, your interactions have a what and a how and a why, right? So it's not just business contextual to a need of the company. It's also like, why am I having this conversation with you? I'm having this conversation with you because I enjoy conversation. I get something out of it. We're going to make each other better, right? There's a consistent improvement. You go back to sports. I was a sports guy. You're a sports guy, right? My dad, I'll never forget, ingrained in my brain, always go and play with the people that are better than you. Play against the people that are better than you because that's when you're going to get better. That same context, if it becomes a how and a why and a what from a relationship standpoint, and you can start to identify those things, then it gets even more to what you just said. Then there's more credibility. There's more trusts. There's more growth. And you start experiencing growth from a duality, right? In congruence with each other rather than just, hey, I got this relationship. It's letting me grow. And then it becomes, hey, we're growing. It's a different ball game across the board when you get to that point, but it is a process. Everybody wants to jump from A to Z.
It doesn't exist. There's no magic bullets. There's nothing in the bag that either one of us can pull out and solve problems. If we did, we'd be there with that holding that close to our vest, just like we would be that process that works 1,000% of the time, right?
Holding a bag of gold is what we'd be doing.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Well, good news. We're gonna do another one because as you and I both know, we had so many conversations, and we could probably build so much content over the course of a year, right? I want to in this one for you. I want to, if a business owner, if a company executive leader is watching this and saying, "Hey, I want to have a conversation, right, with Jackson, just
Absolutely.
right, get some value, get an opinion, get whatever it may be." How can they get in touch with you? What are the good ways that they can follow you?
Best ways, LinkedIn, Jackson Blaylock. I'm right there. I check it on a regular basis. Jackson at PRIGlobal.com. Easiest way from an email standpoint. I'll put the number out there as well in the show notes, if you will.
Yeah, that's what I say. I'll include all those links too. But LinkedIn's a good one for you.
LinkedIn's a great one, but honestly, in the notes from a connection standpoint, give me a shout. Give me a call. If I don't pick up, I promise you I'll call you back. Shoot me a text. Communication is a multi-way street, right? So, I mean, there's different avenues to take of it. Utilize all of them. I check them on a regular basis. It's the way that we grow these relationships. So by all means, let's set up a meeting and have a chat.
Cool. Well, as you know, I appreciate it. That's you're the reason why I love talking with you is you make me better every single time I talk with you. So we'll keep this up. But I'm grateful for you coming and spending some time for me on the Grow IT podcast, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Thank you, sir.
All right, bud.
All right, take care.